Order, order. And welcome to the Science, Innovation and Technology Select Committee's Innovation Showcase. So the committee wants to understand how the UK supports innovators and obviously what more can be done. And so to inform our work, we select an innovator to share their story before our main evidence session each week. Adam Thompson has suggested this week's innovator, so I'll ask Adam to introduce him.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is Dan Carlotta-Jones. Dan's an old friend of mine, actually, from university. We played in a band together many years ago. Aside from being
innovative?
Aside from being an excellent bassist, however, Dan studied biochemistry at university and went on afterwards to do a really interesting engineering doctorate project at the University of Warwick, focusing on wastewater treatment and use of wastewater to create fuel for renewable energy. Dan then went to work on Severn Trent, and Severn Trent have got a plant in my constituency in Erewash, where I think Dan spent some time over the years, and then eventually branched out to start his own business, Wastewater Fuels. So I'm really glad to introduce Dan with us today to talk about some of the great innovations that he and his colleagues at Wastewater Fuels have been doing.
Fabulous, thank you. Over to you, Dan.
Thank you very much. So this morning, my journey from Leamington Spa, where I live, to London took about an hour and 20 minutes. But if I'd taken that journey about 100 years ago on a lovely old steam engine, it would have been less comfortable, less efficient, and certainly a lot longer. It's safe to say that although steam engines are a lot more beautiful than the trains we use today, we've had amazing technological innovation in locomotion over the past 100 years. But while we were riding around on steam engines, another revolution in sewage treatment was actually happening at the same time that not many people know about, and it's what we refer to as the activated sludge plant. If you want to picture it, close your eyes, you're in a lovely jacuzzi with water and bubbles, just replace the water with sewage. And that's what an activated sludge plant is. Now, although that's not a nice image, I can assure you that it has made absolute amazing impact when it comes to treating water to a high standard. But over the past 100 years, it's not really changed. It's still the same hole in the ground with bubbles, blowing air to treat wastewater. Is that a problem? Is it a case of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Well, I think it actually is a bit of a problem, because in the UK, 2 to 3% of all the energy we use goes into treating wastewater, of which around 60% is attributed to that aeration, that activated sludge. So if you want to try and deal with that in a more economical and environmentally friendly way, you're going to need to make a bit of a change. But it gets worse, because within that wastewater there's value. There is the opportunity to recover hydrogen, methane, other products of value, and that process is stopping that from being a possibility. But that's where Wastewater Fuels comes in. We are a hardware startup based in the West Midlands, where we're really trying to change the way in which we view wastewater and ideally try and change the way in which we treat it. We've developed a technology that can recover methane and hydrogen from wastewater, where effectively you can turn a sewage works into a power plant of the future. And it really can be net energy positive, because the energy we put into this system is less than the energy that we get out. And we've demonstrated that both in real wastewaters and in simulated ones in our lab. Now, in terms of how we're able to make a really big difference, our technology doesn't use aeration. It's what we describe as an anaerobic process, or in other words, where there is no oxygen. And what we do is we effectively supercharge microorganisms, give them a little bit of power, and just make them consume all of those lovely pollutants, which we think are horrible, but they absolutely love. In terms of the wider impacts, we've talked a lot about sewage, but actually agriculture, drinks, food, breweries, they all produce wastewater that can be incredibly potent. It's actually 10 to 20 times stronger than domestic sewage. All of that requires treatment. So the next time you're in the stranger's bar enjoying a nice pint, I can tell you that about 4 to 10 pints of wastewater are produced for every pint of beer that we drink. So it is quite a big problem that we have to try and address. Now, in terms of impacts, just looking at untreated wastewater across the world, around 50% of wastewater globally is not treated effectively. And that's not even talking about the market of wastewater that is treated effectively, that obviously we can target immediately. If we start to look at the environmental impacts, 10% of methane emissions, and if you're not aware, methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, about 3 to 4 times more powerful than carbon dioxide, is derived from polluted wastewater streams. So if you can stop those polluted wastewater streams from getting to the environment, you can stop those methane emissions, and obviously there's the recovery of value. Then we get onto the health concerns. So the World Health Organization in 2022 identified that about 1.7 billion people actually are forced to use water that is contaminated with human feces. That's a third of the world's population. That's resulting in approximately 1 million deaths a year. And I think that is a bit of a stark reminder because, we can turn on the taps here in your home and it's not going to do you any harm. But that is not the reality for a third of the world's population. Moving on to the economic benefits, if we just take the hydrogen, let alone the savings on energy, let alone the biomethane, in the UK, if we were to capture all of the potential hydrogen from our wastewater, from human sewage, you could recover about 5.5 terawatt hours of hydrogen. Wow, that's a big number. What does that mean? It's about 2 million homes of energy a year. So it's pretty significant, and that's not to mention all the other energy you can save. So in order to make this a reality, Wastewater Fuels has raised funding from venture capital, grants, and we've also won prizes, about a total of 7.5 million. And we've used that to try and develop our technology further and do as many technology demonstrators as we can to continue to grow the business. A lot of our work has actually been in partnership with the UK Ministry of Defence. So they've funded a lot of our work because they're very interested in resilience. And this has culminated in our most recent project, Project Cavendish, which is set up at a real sewage works in the West Midlands in partnership with Severn Trent. And we're soon to start the next phase of our development with Ofwat. We won an innovation Ofwat bid, which will be deploying an even larger scale version of the technology that will be targeting those stronger wastewaters I mentioned earlier. And the reason we're interested in strong wastewater is because the filthier and stronger the wastewater, the more hydrogen, the more methane you can recover. So lots of value to be recovered. So a lot of progress, but there's certainly challenges that startups like ours have to overcome. One that we have overcome is just access to support. When you're starting a company, you have to think about HR, legals, health and safety, organisation. That is quite a difficult thing to do depending on how much experience you've got. There are accelerators that can assist you, but as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you have to really struggle where you split your time, so support there and access to places would be great. But obviously, the biggest challenge that startups like us have to overcome is what we call the valley of death. And if you're not aware, there usually is quite a bit of funding for small-scale innovation in academia. There is then loads and loads of investment for technologies that are proven. But the technologies of today that require the investment to demonstrate what they can do, which are ultimately going to solve things like climate change, that are going to solve environmental challenges, that are going to solve the future problems, don't have access to that funding as easily. The risk is not the most appetizing thing for investors. And I think it's particularly concerning for the water sector. And water is probably our most valuable resource, yet it is probably the most difficult to fund from a startup perspective. That's it. That's my soapbox. So Wastewater Fuels has honestly been the most challenging but also rewarding part of my career so far. And if we do deploy this technology at large scale in the UK, globally, across Europe, wherever we go with it, it's safe to say that we can have environmental, social and economic benefits. We don't have to be green for green's sake. We'll be greener, better and give loads of value to everybody. So thank you very much. If you ever want to know more, come see what we do. Let me know.
Very good. Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel. That's really, I feel now that we don't talk about sewage enough because that was fascinating and also inspiring. And, I always say, people talk about engineering as not being that women are more interested, for example, in caring professions. I say engineering is a caring profession because what you're doing in terms of looking to bring safe water and address climate change is incredibly important for all of us. So thank you very much for being our innovation showcase and good luck in your future development. Thank you. Order.
Thank you.
Order.